Okay, so today we're going to talk about elliptical still lifes. Elliptical still lifes are those that have cylinders, ellipses, circles in them. So I suggest you first start, like I am doing here, with a study of ellipses. This line I've drawn is my eye level, and I'm going to show you how ellipses get bigger as they come closer to you. They also widen their opening as you move above or below them. And so wherever their alignment is with your eye level will kind of determine how wide open. Right? So as you notice, as I move further and further down from my eye level, it opens up much more. Right? And the same is true if I'm looking underneath an ellipse. Right? So, for example, if a glass is above and below my eye level, I will see it opening to the back, and so then I won't see the lip open to the front. And so I would suggest doing this several times. Just let it flow, keep it really quick, and just work on building ellipses. Now here's a no-no with ellipses. Notice how that ellipse uh, comes to a point. This one is too much of a square. The idea is to have all four sides, all four corners the same. Now that ellipse there is a little too much the same in the front and the back. The back needs to be less than what you have in the front of an ellipse. Also try doing some more cylinders like you were doing within the cubes, but extending those. So here's an example of what I was talking about, where the glass is above and below your eye level. You can see how you see the top and the bottom both kind of converging out. And now I'm going to draw cross contour lines to show depth and form. And the reason is so that you can see the shape. All right, so if I draw straight lines like on the first cylinder, it looks flat. But if I curve those lines I'm going to use for shadows, then I can actually mimic and give the illusion of the shape of the cylindrical object. When I do vertical cross contour lines, they're going to be closer together near the edges of the sides. This will also help with shading. So practice several different cylindrical objects. Um, you know, work on single objects themselves first. Play around and try to show the facade of each different face, which direction its cross contour is going. So that circle in the middle, it will be a radial cross contour. Here I'm going to show you a bottle, and the bottle will show you how it curves on the sides, but also how I can create more shading on one side than the other. But giving that curved line is going to create this illusion of depth and form that you're trying to achieve. And eventually you can build that up to shading. So let's start with our first still life. Toilet paper, as you know, is a hot commodity during the coronavirus quarantine. I'm not really sure why, but it seems to be the thing that's selling out all the stores. So I set up a still life of this toilet paper, numerous different angles. So you should too take photographs of the still lifes that you set up. And so the first still life I'm going to draw is I'll just do a cross contour, and you'll start to see how I've built that up by basically drawing guidelines of my perspective, and then building kind of like the shapes themselves within those guidelines. And here you can see the drawing appear. And essentially what I'm wanting you to show is the shape in all three dimensions, all curves. What are these assumed lines that aren't the contour of the lines? The contour lines are actually the outside lines, the darkest lines themselves. What I'm looking for you to go ahead and go further into is showing me its actual shape. All right, so let me show you how I can go about doing this drawing. Again, I like to start with some perspective lines that allow me to see which direction the objects are going. Now, all of these rolls of toilet paper, well, 3 of them are going in different directions, and then 3 of them are all going standing straight up. So I'm going to have a variety of vanishing points and directions that these are turning. So lay it in really light and loose. I allow myself to kind of make mistakes and erase those mistakes and build up. You got to feel it out. Your first line is never going to be your best line. And you notice that I go over and over and over numerous times very lightly, and then when I feel a little bit more confident about the lines, the shapes themselves, I come in and I start to darken those contour lines, those outside lines. And you notice the inside of the rolls, I'm shading those in, but I'm also shading them at a curve. And that curve is going to, again, show that shape, show the curvature of the roll itself. And I go in and I even darken it some more. This one, that top roll, I probably could have curved the bottom side of it a little bit more, back side of it, but it doesn't have to be perfect. This is your sketchbook, and I'm not expecting perfection right away. There I drew in the line that separates the shelf from the wall, and here I'm going to add some vertical cross contour lines. And notice again how the cross contour lines are much closer towards the edges. This kind of gives the illusion that the closest point of that ellipse, is rounder towards you, more closer towards you, and then that the sides are turning, and it gives you that perspective. On the ends there, since it's flat, I come out from the center, and the center is going to be a little bit further towards the back than it is the front, just because of vanishing perspective. And here I'm going to throw a 2-point perspective grid along the bottom, so you can see that there is kind of a setting, a plane for this toilet paper to sit on. But then you notice that the vertical lines in the back can accentuate and give the illusion of the fact that it's a straight wall. And then I draw all my shadows in. And I draw those along the direction of my cross contours, and then I try to draw it towards my vanishing points, which are all imaginary here. I'm not going and trying to actually find all those vanishing points like we did with architectural drawings. It's going to have to be a little bit more imagination, a little more use of estimation. And if you take photographs, you'll have a nice, good subject to work with that sits still. So the next subject that we're going to do is some coffee. I've been drinking a lot of coffee to get through this quarantine. So I'm going to draw this actually 3 times. So the first one is really quick sketch done of cross contour. Um, and you can see I didn't quite like that composition enough, and so I'm going to bring the coffee mug a little closer. I'm going to try it again, and this time I'm going to kind of build cubes around the objects themselves. And so I'm going to imagine that I'm drawing these as boxes in 2-point perspective, and then I'm going to fill these objects into these boxes. And this really kind of allows me to place everything where it should be. And that placement is going to make sure that I have the right distance from one object to the next. So let me show you kind of this process. So again, I start with some lines of perspective. First, kind of laying out the basic structure of what they're sitting on, the counter and the stove behind it. And then I come in here and I start to imagine what these clear, invisible cubes are, these boxes that the objects are. Now notice the relationship of the tea kettle to the mug. The mug is obviously much smaller than the tea kettle, but because it's so much closer, it actually appears bigger. So keep things like that in mind. Um, and next is trying to show how my ellipses obviously are widening much larger as they get closer to you. So that saucer is going to be nearly, opening up closer to a circle, whereas the tea kettle, its base is a much shallower, much narrower ellipse. All right, and so again, I keep the pencil constantly moving. Just building lightly. I can always come in and erase. And I come in and I give myself guidelines. I look at the relationships, and I also look at the negative space in between the objects. The negative space is anything in between, right? It's the air. It's the non-objects, all right? So we would say that the coffee maker, the tea kettle, the saucer, and the cup, those are the objects, and everything around that is kind of negative space. And by comparing that negative space, the space in between, you can get the right relationships from one object to another. For example, right now I'm putting the knobs into the stove, and those knobs I'm looking at where they touch the main subject, the kettle, the coffee filter here. Right now I'm showing the ellipse of what the coffee looks like. I'm also coming in, adding some cross contour, giving that illusion of form. All right, and trying to maintain the right lines to get the shapes, the curves. But again, notice how a lot more lines near the edges. Right? And don't be afraid to make mistakes. You make a mistake, you come in, you can erase it, clean it up. Right? Right now, first thing I'm really looking for you to be able to achieve is how to get these lines correct, how to build an ellipse correct. Right? So in this mug, you notice that I'm drawing the cross contours on the inside as well. And you kind of imagine that those lines all have this vanishing point way anchoring down, as well as off to the sides. So you might want even to start thinking about the third point of perspective that all these objects have to one another, and that's looking far deep down, you know, into the earth. There's a vanishing point where the cubes, these boxes that we place these objects into, their lines would all eventually meet. And so now I'm going in and really kind of darkening things up, adding value. I really encourage you, now I'm using like a 4B and a 6B pencil. I encourage you to really push your darks. Go in with an 8B pencil if you can, and you know, be dramatic with the dark. But notice how I start light and I build on top of it. So you know, you don't have to go dark right away, but build it up. Your first layer isn't going to be your best layer. That's how I kind of come back in and touch things up over and over again. And when I don't like them, I kind of either erase them. Here I'm erasing to kind of bring out some highlights where the light's hitting it the hardest, and kind of clean that up. And there you have it. And so the next drawing I'm going to do for you is cylindrical as well, but it's going to be clear. It's going to be glass. And working with glass can be really unique and rewarding. So here, as you can see, I've taken numerous different angles. You can see that my ellipse is wide open and narrower, depending on how high or how low of an angle that I'm shooting my subject matters. All right, so my first sketch, I'm going to show you kind of straight from the beginning to the end. And I quickly, very lightly, very loosely, trying not to spend much time at all, just lay out the objects as I see them before me. So this still life is actually on my drawing table, and where I'm doing all of my work now. So it's right here in front of me. And start kind of laying out the salt shakers. They're going to be kind of unique because of their kind of faceted shapes. This cup here, awfully close in the foreground, and quickly just lay out some contour lines, kind of get that ellipse in there, and just build out that cup as quickly as I can. And then back here to the jar, work out the jar. And as you can see, I probably need to kind of tilt it a little bit. It seems like it's not quite on the angle with the cup and the shakers. And then we also have this other glass in behind. You see now that I've got the objects kind of thrown in there, I'm going to go in and kind of work out their shapes a little bit more. Add that cross contour, both vertical and that horizontal ellipse contour. And get that in there. And then kind of revisit this jar. I revisit it a few times before I get anywhere close to happy with it. And that's also good to kind of think about your background, where that's going to connect all of these objects and make them feel like they're sitting in the same space together. And what I strongly suggest is working, kind of building your darks, but also you can go in where you know it's your absolute darkest. Get that in there too. But I think I like to work light to dark, but I also like to get some darks in there and work towards the middle sometimes. It helps to kind of lay out where your shadows are going to be, build those in. Notice I just keep it really quick and loose. I'm not trying to worry too much about detail. Just kind of bring out the shapes through their shadows. And you're going to see that I add a lot of little details. Details are something that you need to kind of save to the end. Not looking for too many details, especially if it comes to like text on any kind of objects. You can leave logos off. That's not the point of this. What I'm really looking to see is that you can show me shape, build that form, through the cross contour, as well as eventually through adding dark and light, the shadows and the highlights. Next week we're going to really talk about value. Right now I'm hoping that you can learn to build value through lines, through cross contour, cross hatching, but showing really the thing I want you to get out of this week is showing your shadows through these curved lines that follow the shape of the objects, building out their form, making them look like something that you could actually pick up, even though there are these imaginary lines kind of draped across them like a grid. And so as you can see here, I've gone in and started to add the bottom of the window. And what's interesting, and you can show this too if you want, is the distortion that comes from curved glass. You see there, and now I'm going to build up shadows even more. The pepper shaker is going to need to really be darker, but also has this reflection of the salt shaker in it. And now I'm going to come through and start adding details and bring out the kind of how the glass is cut. And this is also going to help show that there's a front and there's a back, and which side is actually pointing towards us, right? Now it appears a lot more evident than it was before. And here I'm filling in the negative space. I'm going to want you to do that as well with one of your still lifes, is fill in that dark space in the back and above, all the space around. Your first still life, it can be just cross contour. I'm not worried about what it's sitting on or the negative space around it. But the second one, I want you to go ahead and fill in that background. And so I like to, as you can see, build more layers, more layers. I start with an HB pencil, and then a 2B, 4B, 6B, and then I come in to the end and I add 8B pencil. Really kind of darken up and try to keep my lines again along that form, showing that the space is created, the form is created by those imaginary cross contour lines. And now I come through with my eraser, and I'm going to bring out the highlights. So it's better to have too much on the paper so that you can start to remove with the eraser. Use the eraser as a drawing tool to bring light back out of the dark that you've created with the layers of graphite. And that's about as much as I'm looking for. This drawing took approximately 30 minutes. I would spend about an hour at most on each of your drawings. So I'm going to attempt the drawing again from this angle, and here I'm going to start actually by so I added the negative space, the background, through the window. You can see the trees. I kind of through the window and the back the wall and back there. And here I'm going to really focus on a strong cross contour, making sure that that is uh, kind of as on point as possible. And I'm really going to bring out my contour lines, build in also that negative space there on that wall. But I'm going to really show in this one uh, my contour lines popping it out. It's going to give it a more dramatic effect. Um, and again, now I'm adding shadows. Um, I'm following along that cross contour, and it's making it a lot easier for me to come in and add more shape and details later. Here I'm showing the reflections of these objects into the table. Um, and go as far as even adding the name of the jar company. Um, but nothing more. There's some more text I'm going to leave out just because it's going to be a little too distracting. Showing kind of the distortion in the glass uh, that it creates of the view of the window. Um, add highlights by using my eraser, and I like to bring those highlights out to show the front. Now notice on this one, our objects are both above and below eye level. So the bottoms are curved down and the tops are actually curved up. That's one reason why I showed this is so that you could see um, how that looks in action. Um, kind of come in and add some final shadows, and then I'm going to show you examples of a still life in a mirror. So it's a great way to double up your objects, but also makes for kind of a compelling composition. So everything kind of lines up as it should if your mirror is at a 90-degree angle with your base. So here you can see all of these objects all have these similar vanishing points. And I've drawn these vanishing points going in two points. And as you can see, um, they line up with their reflection in the mirror. So essentially, I started with building those boxes and fitting them into those boxes. And then now you can see I can take the drawing a step farther, and that's what I'm looking for is a value drawing as well. So I'm looking for two value drawings. So there's one. Another one here is my nightstand. So I've got candle, lighter, some Kleenex, um, my wedding ring with a marble and some bracelets and so I'm going to go with this composition here. I think it's kind of the most dynamic. Um, it fits everything into the page. And for this one, I'm going to use colored pencil, Prismacolor colored pencil, but I'm going to use the grays, the black, and the white, and I'm going to sketch it out. And you can use whatever materials you can find. Um, you can use ballpoint pen. Uh, you can use markers. Um, whatever you have, any kind of pencils you have, don't worry about it if you don't have your actual drawing supplies. And last, I wanted to show you some examples from previous semester students. So as you can see, they keep it really quick and loose and light, but you can also notice that they build up the ellipses and they build up working on that perfect cross contour and building that shape and form and so start with that. Set up these still lifes with anywhere from 3 to 10 objects. Um, but make sure they're all cylindrical or elliptical rather. All right, so that if you look straight down on them, they'd be circular. It's a great place to start. Next week we're going to work with more organic shapes, non-elliptical shapes. But for now, I want you to get the general form of what bottles and glasses and so forth, round objects, look like. And if you have any questions this week, feel free to email me. And don't be afraid to ask questions. Um, uh, this is going to be a interesting time, but use it to be creative, and let your still life say something about who you are, and kind of come up with a theme, and think about multiple different kinds of compositions you can use. All right, good luck.